So hello Internet. So my fiance and I were discussing some of the Elder Dragons of Guild Wars 2 and discussing some of the real-world influences behind their creation. And I ended up looking up a little bit more into some of the details of these real-world influences and ended up going down this big long rabbit hole of predictions. So I'd like to share a bit of that with you right now. So for starters, I was particularly impressed with Mordramoth's real-world equivalent. That Mordramoth's real-world equivalent is Mordred, which, according to Wikipedia, Mordred was an Arthurian character who betrayed King Arthur. And it says right on it, virtually everywhere where Mordred appears, his name is synonymous with treachery. This is particularly interesting detail because Mordramoth fought primarily with treachery. Most of his minions were Silvari who had betrayed their allies. So this got me wondering, I wonder if there are other clues in the lore hidden in real-world lore. I wonder if we can predict what's going to happen by looking at real-world lore. So this led me to look at Jormag next. Jormag is unquestionably named after the Norse character Jormungandr, who is a sea serpent who, according to Wikipedia, was thrown into the great ocean that encircles Midgard. The serpent grew so large that it was able to encircle the earth and grasp its own tail. This seems a bit strange to me. Obviously, because the Norns are heavily influenced by Norse mythology, I mean, they're called Norns for goodness sake, it makes sense that they would have a Norse dragon that's bothering them. But in terms of mythology, it would make a lot more sense if Jormag was the yet unnamed deep sea dragon. Jormungandr is a sea serpent who inhabits the great ocean. The deep sea dragon is a dragon that inhabits the unending ocean. It kind of makes sense there. This got me thinking about who the deep sea dragon actually was, or what his influence would be on. An obvious choice would be to base it off of the Leviathan, or something like that, but if ANET was going to use an obvious choice, why hasn't it been revealed yet? This lack of information on the dragon tells us more than any information that they could have given us could possibly tell us. This tells us that in terms of story, the reveal of the deep sea dragon is going to be significant in some way. So, now the conspiracy theorist inside of me comes out and says, what if Jormag is the deep sea dragon? A little bit crazy, but hear me out here. One of the common lore speculations I've seen is that when one dragon dies, its magic re-enters the world and is absorbed by other dragons. Glint's egg is now going to hatch and compete with the elder dragons for influence over magic in the world. Many people believe that some dragons will actually fight to consume baby Glint and steal the power that she's absorbed. So, if this is in fact the case, that dragons can fight with each other and absorb each other's power, who's to say that it hasn't happened before? Who's to say that Jormag couldn't have killed the deep sea dragon and now holds domain over the deep sea dragon, or the deep sea, in addition to the domain over ice? This would certainly explain the discrepancy in the lore, and why Jormag's minions and idols are always represented in blue instead of white, which is the orb color associated with Jormag. In terms of location, this also seems very plausible. A recent Redditor created a map that located the ley lines and related them to where the dragon's hiding spots are likely to be. If this is correct, then Jormag and the deep sea dragon should be right next to each other, easily close enough to get into an epic battle of some sort. The timing lines up from a storytelling perspective as well. Which elder dragon are we going to fight next? Well, it makes sense that Krakatorrik or Primordius would be saved to last. Primordius because he was the first Elder Dragon, and Krakatorrik because it would provide closure for the Destiny's Edge storyline. Destiny's Edge being the first people who fought an Elder Dragon and losing people in the process, yada yada yada, so on and so forth. It's a good storytelling closing technique. So that means that storytelling, it would make sense that Jormag or the Deep Sea Dragon would be up next in terms of who we're going to be fighting. And what better way to reveal that dragons can steal each other's power than by revealing that two Elder Dragons are actually one? Glint is likely going to be a very significant part of the next storyline because it is a new Elder Dragon, and so it makes sense that we might have a reveal that dragons can steal each other's influence, and what better way to do that than by showing that it's already happened. This is all some pretty anecdotal evidence though, so I decided to dig a little bit deeper to see if I could find something a bit more substantial. And the answer is not really, but hear me out here. So I decided to look back at the cinematic for entering Omad's machine. So in this cinematic, your character enters a machine created by Omad, the one that originally drove Scarlet insane, and it shows you existence, I guess? It's a little bit vague. Right inside of the ley lines, something or other. But anyways, so a lot of stuff goes on here. There's a lot of stuff that we can analyze, but I'm going to cut out most of it and just go straight to 30 seconds in. So here we see a big swoopy orb thing, assumed to be Tyria, surrounded by 6 smaller orbs, assumed to be the Elder Dragons. They are lined up on axes heading through Tyria, with Mordramoth and Zhaitan lined up, and Krakatorrik and Primordius being lined up. Mordramoth and Zhaitan were the first 2 dragons that we encountered, so they're lined up. If Krakatorrik and Primordius are the last 2 dragons that we encounter, then they're also lined up, so we could extrapolate that Jormag and Bubbles should also appear at similar points in the storyline. This is anecdotal at best, but it's still better than nothing. But now things get really strange here. So the orbs begin to light up, also in the same order that the dragons awakened, cool little detail there, and spin around Tyria for a bit. The big green Mordremoth orb comes into view, then smashes into Tyria, representing him as the greatest threat facing Tyria and teasing Heart of Thorns a bit. But the strange thing is that this green orb is not Mordremoth. Mordremoth's orb is represented by lime green. It's seen over here. This dark green orb represents Zhaitan. We can look on the Wikipedia page and see that Zhaitan's orb is represented in green. Like I said earlier, all of the orbs light up in the order that the dragons are awakened. This dark green orb is awakened at the same time that Zhaitan should have been awakened, in that same order. So this dark green orb is Zhaitan, and it's assumed that this orb smashing into Tyria represents that this is the greatest threat facing Tyria right now. So the greatest threat facing Tyria is Zhaitan, the dragon that's already dead. So I'm proposing now that Zhaitan is not dead, he's actually still alive. I mean, for starters, we can go ahead and just look at the rest of the video and see the world expanding out into what was assumed to be vines originally, but why not shadow? Zhaitan is the dragon of death and shadow, and this certainly seems to be fairly shadowy, a bit more so than viney, if you were to ask me. If you also really stop and think about it, it makes perfect sense as well. Heart of Thorns revealed that each dragon has a weak point. With Mordremoth, it was his mind, and so we attacked his mind, and that's how we killed him. But doesn't it seem awfully convenient that Zhaitan's weakness just happened to be getting shot by lasers? Especially considering that Zhaitan is the dragon of death and shadow. It seems that he should be fairly resistant to death, considering that he frequently brings things back to life. So I propose that Zhaitan is in fact still alive. He's the dragon of death, so he should be hard to kill for one, but he is also the dragon of shadow. The shadow part is interesting considering how little it comes to play in the actual storyline. It seems to me that Zhaitan could be living up to his shadow name now and is hiding in the shadows, if it were. He is the greatest threat to Tyria because he lives unseen, amassing all of the energy that he can find. As each dragon dies, there's more and more energy for him to get, until eventually, when the last dragon is killed, he can reveal himself as the ultimate ruler. So, that's just some of the crazy stuff that I found. And again, all of this is just totally anecdotal evidence, just me giving random predictions out of nowhere. But I'd be curious to hear what any of you guys think. So if you have a comment, please feel free to leave it down below or in the Reddit thread that I'm going to be posting this video onto. I'd be very curious to see what people have to say. And I'd also like to say, I know I'm probably not the first person to make a lot of these connections. I'm a little bit slow to bat on a lot of that. But I had never heard any of these predictions before, so I figured, what the hell. Anyways, thanks for watching. Have a good night.